We are going to talk today about the archetype of Venus, Taurus, and the second house. Now, this is a beautiful, feminine, fertile archetype, as we've seen in the video of this archetype. But these audios, they're meant to complement the videos in the sense that we are not just looking at the journey of the ego as much as we are looking at the journey of the soul. Because the soul is the intention for the ego to even exist. So this audio is to complement this archetype and to bring the perspective of the nature of this archetype. What is the real reason, the purpose, the real true function of this Venus, Taurus, and second house archetype in a natal chart? Where is Venus in your chart? Have you ever heard the phrase, your values, your value systems? When you hear about Venus, when you hear about the second house, yes, it is. Why? Why? Well, if we're looking at the zodiac wheel as in the stages of man, right, the cycles of man, we are talking about the journey of re-identifying what the ego means. So if the ascendant point in the first house represent the ego and what the ego means, right? The entrance of the ego. That's the ascendant point. Then what is the second house after it comes into the world? Well, the first house is a very instinctual house. And as a matter of fact, so is the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. These are the 4 stages of developing the ego. And in the second house, this is where you develop your values. When you enter the world, Aries, first house, entrance of the ego, here you are full of instincts. Why? Because your only point of awareness is to survive. So here you have the instincts. And when you have the instincts, these leads to having, right? Second house, to having, to acquiring. And this, obviously, this leads to this creates your sense of values, which then, of course, generates your meaning and your belief system. So really, these are all keywords that are connected to the second house. Values, meaning, beliefs. These all come from a very instinctual nature, a nature to survive. Now, it's very important for us to realize that the nature of the second house is to have. And even the sexual aspect, even the fertile aspect, in the stages of life, this is a very basic instinctual place of procreation. So even the planet Venus here, it is easy to sometimes mistake her for love. Now, while Venus is very much seen in relationships and matters of the heart, let me make this very clear here that Venus is not about love. It can be about the sense of love. It does spark that interest, that romantic filter in our experiences. But it doesn't necessarily mean love. It can be, depending on other combinations in the chart of, for example, a progressed Sun conjunct Venus is one very powerful key combination for a soulmate, a twin flame. So it really depends on the combination, but the character of Venus in and of itself comes from a very, very strong desire, instinctual nature to have. So Venus needs a lot of things. And it's important to keep that in mind, because if you're looking at a Venus that is not very healthy or not very happy, there could be some unbalances that are brought into the story, especially depending on the type of character you're dealing with. So there are many ways to deal with a square, with an opposition. So it really depends who you're dealing with. But the nature of Venus really is to acquire. And that is why Venus is so closely related to our value system, to money as well. Now, the second house is definitely related to money. But at the end of the day, even that is contingent upon the true essence of the second house, which is one's value system. Now, the value system that is created here in this house is one that is created at a very early age of life. Very early age of life, like we saw in the video. We saw the second house as being the stage of the baby, when the baby becomes aware of sensations, right? Of the mother, of the father, of the love, of the care, or the lack of it. So the second house really is where we develop what we consider to be our value system, the things that are important to us. Thus, we create meaning to our lives, and of course, our belief systems based on that. So even though the second house is just the second house, it's not just the second house. The second house is a very, very deep one. I mean, as a matter of fact, it is where we find the roots, what brings us stability. Its function is to create roots and sustainment. So it is a really important house in someone's chart, because here we can determine what it is that the soul has chosen to experience in order to create a set of belief systems based on internal values of whatever it was that the parents said was okay or not okay when it was a baby, all the experiences or lack of them. These all create an imprint on what becomes the ego's value system. Now, this is going to vary from person to person. And of course, when we start to work with charts and look at that, we're going to see some examples and that in action. But this is for you to get a general feeling of the essence of this archetype and the purpose for it. Because sometimes you're going to see someone with a transiting Pluto, for example, that is starting to enter someone's second house. What does that mean? We know the second house is money. But what does a Pluto entering the second house mean? The second house is the house of money. Only because money is a reflection of someone's internal value system, their experiences of self, admiration, respect, love, worth, things that all were imprinted to them as babies. And some people are going to have a very generous spirit, a very open spirit. Others will be more conservative in nature. Others will be a little too hard on themselves. Others will be a little more in other realms, like Pisces or Neptune in the second house. These people, their value system consists of things of other realms and of spiritual nature, or maybe some sort of mysticism, spirituality, things of a Piscean nature. So, yes, by the sign of your second house, you can determine very well what some of these values and attributes are to you. Now, let's remember that the function of this archetype in Taurus as well, okay? Taurus, Venus, second house, is a very feminine energy. And the function of this archetype is to bring back all the energy that Aries and Mars have bursted out in that first impulse of life. Think of the Big Bang. That's Aries, Mars, first house. The function of the Taurus, Venus, and second house archetype is to bring it back into the center and then to consolidate it, to give specific form to all that energy. So that's why here we have the principle of stabilizing, of grounding, of planting, of rooting. So yes, when you do see a transit going into the second house, there is something in there wanting to be rooted, to be grounded. Maybe there is a part of the person's personality. If you're looking at a progressed planet entering the second house, there is a planet that is ready to experience self-reliance, self-sufficiency, self-sustainment. These are all keywords here, and you can be writing it down, making note. There are many keywords and key phrases here throughout this audio, but at its core, there is a very fundamental desire nature here that we are seeing with this archetype of Taurus, of Venus, and of the second house. And it does come from instinct. Yes, it is operated from the soul. Yes, it is for the ultimate purpose of self-discovery. But it's projected through instinct, through ego. So this archetype, when it's unbalanced, unhealthy, reflected in a distorted way, can bring a lot of greediness, right? Because the desire nature that comes from the instinct. And even when we're looking at sexuality here, we can have sexuality that is unbalanced, that is distorted, that is needing too much of. So here we can have a lot of very unbalanced ways to experience the pleasures of life. Because Venus, second house, Taurus, these are all supposed to produce beauty, supposed to produce harmony, right? All those things that are just pleasant to the ears, pleasant to the senses. And it can be a very, very comfortable place, depending on what you're looking at, what the cycle is. But we can also have some experiences here that lead to an overdoing of things that bring us pleasure. And this is a very real thing to keep in mind here, because this house is very easy to get misled and forget that it does have an unbalanced side. And people that have a very, let's say, seductive nature, or a nature that enjoys these type of pleasures and sensations, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with. But if there are unbalances in the chart, this can lead to an unhealthy overdoing of. Now, on the other hand, this can also be expressed through the opposite polarity, which is a complete denial of. So, if you see, for example, people that have a Venus conjunct Saturn, Saturn can bring the limitation, the denial of something. It can bring a sort of distancing. Now, of course, as you will see when we talk about Saturn, it also has some amazing attributes. Here's where we find consistency, something that is solid, safe, committed. But depending on the chart, a Venus conjunct Saturn could be a lesson. And this could represent a person that is too hard on themselves when it comes to matters of the heart, to relationships, to sisters, to certain feminine figures in their life. So we want to keep in mind the nature here, the nature of this archetype, which really comes from the desire. Desire of, do I have, do I not have? And let's remember that when we evaluate what we have or don't have, it is very easy to compare. This is another byproduct of an unhealthy Venus here, or a planet that is heavily afflicted in Taurus. When you start to compare, you get jealous, manipulative, right? You have all the distortions. And when you get jealous, you can act, you can get competitive. So there are a lot of consequences depending on how the chart is laid out. But the true essence of this archetype really is to experience life through having desires. So desires is not a bad thing in and of itself. The cause of it, the real purpose of it, is so that we can experience life, so that we can create, explore, make decisions. But when left unchecked, yes, Venus, Taurus can have so many desires. The second house can be a very rigid place of a chart. So, people that were born, let's say, with a lot of planets in the second house, even if we're looking at a fire sign, let's say a Sagittarius in the second house, we want to take into consideration the archetype of Taurus. So it would be like if the person had a strong Taurus as well. Or let's say a moon or a sun. Let's say you have a Sagittarius moon in the second house. You're going to look at it as a Sagittarius moon slash Taurus, with the energy of Taurus, with the components, right? The essence of this archetype, which comes along for any planets in there. So you have a second house, even if you don't have any sign in Taurus. Any planet in Taurus, you have a second house. So that second house brings a Taurus energy to your chart. Do you have any planets in there? It's like having the qualities of Taurus with you. So this archetype of Venus, Taurus, the second house, they bring an aspect of self-reliance, self-sufficiency. And this is so that it can then stabilize something, plant it, ground it, like I said. And it is a very reliable place of the chart. Someone that has a sun here, for example, is a very solid, dependable person, generally speaking. A person with a moon in there needs those qualities. It's very important for them to have that in their environment, to feel that there's stability, maybe routine, all those qualities of Taurus, it's the second house that we looked at in the video. But Taurus Venus, second house, this archetype does bring an element of love, sensuality, pleasure, beauty. But the love that we're looking at here with this archetype, even with Taurus, yes, they are. Yes, they love affection. They do. They're very usually romantic, but it's more. Remember, it's coming from that desire nature. It's more of a body thing. It's more of a physical. It's more of a need. So this archetype does represent keywords here: sexual values and sexual nature. So yes, you can very easily find someone's sexual values and their sexual nature by looking at Venus, second house placements, Taurus placements, especially depending on what they are. Because the sign of Taurus is a very sensual one. So, especially if you're dealing, for example, with the moon, with the sun, with the ascendant, if the ruler of the ascendant is in Taurus, this is a lot of sensuality. And then, of course, the ultimate planets of sensuality are Mars and Venus. So, of course, that found in Taurus, that is the utmost sensuality combination right there. Now, Mars and Venus, they are planets that complement each other when you're looking for someone's sexual values and their sexual nature. But you can find that as well with those same planetary placements in the second house, for example. A moon, if it's not too afflicted in the second house, a sun, especially in the second house, a Mars, a Venus in the second house. Highly, highly erotic combination right there. Now, it's interesting that what you desire, you also find value in, right? Of course, that is where we create our value systems from. But what we value can also supply our means. So check this out. The things that you also value in life, the things that become important to you, they can also be the exact same things that put money in your pocket, quite literally. And we saw a little bit about this in the video. But it's important to remember here that the connection of making money to what it is that we need and value inwardly in order to feel sustained. So this can very easily be seen, especially by the second house. The sign on your second house will show you your set of belief systems, your value systems that you've created, the things that are important for you to maintain inwardly in order for you to feel sustained. But these very same things are also the resources that you have to survive. And this is the connection here. What you value, that creates the resources that you have to make money. So this is why you can see that by someone's sign on their second house, you can see how they can make money, or at least themes of how to make money. So if you have, for example, Gemini in the second house, the person can work in the publishing fields, in media and communication, technology, IT, teacher. So these will represent things that bring a sense of security to you, but also provide that same security to you, the money for you to achieve that. And the ultimate purpose of this archetype is to get to know itself. So here we are at second house, we are creating the ego, we are developing the ego. First house, the ego enters into the world. It enters the world. It has all the instincts. It wants to prowl around. It enters the world, and then it looks around, it sees, and aha, second house. Here we start to correlate. We associate. That's mom, that's dad, that's me. Oh, I can talk, I can speak. If I do this, then that. If I act, then consequence, right? So then we generate values, belief systems, meaning, and thus we give meaning to the life, to our life. So that is the purpose. We are here to find meaning, right? We are going through the wheel. We are experiencing cycles of life. And so the reason why this is so important to know is because you will have experiences activate your second house. Well, first of all, everybody has a second house, whether you have planets in there or not, and you want to understand what it is that your soul is seeking to achieve in this life through this blueprint. So if you have a natal house that is very lit up and activated, then you know your soul is seeking to achieve something through there. There's something important for you to pay attention to. And trust me, some people are here to experience a lot of security. Other people are here to experience a serious lack of security so that through it they can come to find their own self-reliance. It's very deep. So number one, you want to understand the heart and soul of this archetype because you want to have meaning to your charts. You want to know why you have a Pluto or a Saturn in your second house. That can create so much difficulty and challenges for the person to experience self-reliance, abundance, or other things related to that. It's important to have meaning to it. And the other reason why you want to go so in depth here and really understand what the heart and soul of this archetype is and are is because there will be transits, there will be experiences that will come and ignite your second house. There will be progressions. There will be years on a solar return that your second house will be active. So, for example, even as I record this, I am wrapping up a solar return with a very active second house. And yes, while the second house is money and can indicate money, and absolutely these have been themes extremely highlighted for me all the year long, there is more to the story. We're going to synthesize the chart. And hey, what if that chart, like mine, has a whole bunch of oppositions to all the planets there in the second house? Okay, the second house is ignited, but what's the struggle? What's happening at the end of the day? So, understanding the heart and soul of the second house can help you understand the meaning behind certain configurations, alignments, oppositions, conjunctions, and really what the chart is saying at the end of the day. Is the chart bringing a focus on the abundance or the lack of it? Or maybe it's none of it in a physical way. Maybe this is something else, an experience, a personal experience the person is going through in their life that is changing the core structure of their belief system. And this is a very profound thing because when you do get an outer planet, a slow moving planet transiting to this through the second house, this will cause a dent, a shaking of the person's internal value system, which on a deep level impacts their belief system, depending on how deep the transit is. So, understanding why you got fired from your job, or why you're in debt, or why, like I said, maybe it's something personal, maybe it's something on a relationship level, because that is also a very intimate sexual axis, the second and eighth house. So understanding the real core essence of that helps you to understand why you may be going through maybe a relationship crisis, or a splitting of goods and a divorce, or some sort of a financial crisis. And it helps to give meaning to it. So maybe that story is really just a reflection of a restructuring of your internal value system. So that at the end of the day, you could redefine that. And as a consequence, redefine the reflection of your material status. You see how everything is stringed together here? Everything is stringed together. So this is a very, very, very important archetype to understand, and I want you to meditate with that. Meditate with the sign on your second house. What is it? Is it Aquarius? Aquarius is known for its unpredictable nature. We all have Aquarius somewhere in our charts. People that have Aquarius in the second house can, not all, but can have a very unpredictable history of financial comings and goings. Big highs, big lows, or these can be correlated with its own experiences of nourishment as a child. Very rapid ruptures, coming and going of the mother's love, or some sort of person that they cared for very much and developed affection or something. And this creates a rupture and this constant coming and going of what later tends to be reflected as our finances. It's a very profound thing. It goes back to emotions, to psychology, to the soul. But what if at its core nature, the soul is here to experience the unpredictability of Aquarius, so that it can never settle for one thing alone, for one form of love, one gift or talent that it can use as a resource to survive? What if it's its own internal structure of its value system is meant to be ever changing, ever growing, bringing in the new, which is the true purpose of Aquarius, to bring in the new, the original from the future, the radical, the inconsistent. Yes. The revolutionary. Yes. And that is why people with Aquarius here in this axis, in this, either the 8th house or the 2nd house, they can have alternative tastes for sexuality, alternative preferences. Well, what if the soul's function is to experience that? And so at its core nature, at its core level, it brings that inconsistency in maybe the affection of the parents or the connection with its value system. And, who are we to question the motives of the soul? Of course, we can use astrology to better understand it so that we can know ourselves, see our journey. This is very important. This is what astrology is for. But when we look at the sign on the 2nd house, we are literally looking at what the soul has chosen to come with and to define as its own set of belief systems, to have as internal resources that of course can be translated into external resources as well. How you make money, to create its own sense of security, self-reliance. And yes, even if it's through inconsistency. It is the cycle of the soul. So there are many experiences, and whatever sign you have going on in your 2nd house will show you the experience that is here to be of value and worth to you as a soul in this human experience. This is where you will find your sense of values, your personal meaning, and what life means for you. So we want to look at the sign in the second house, the location of the ruler, the aspects that the ruler is making, the location of Venus in your chart, of course, the quality of Venus, and where Taurus is in your chart. And you may be thinking, wait, Raquel, that's way too much. What happened to just the second house? Well, yeah, the second house is a great starting point. But it's going to show you a theme. It's not going to show you the entire story. You want to understand all the pieces. You want to look at Venus. Look at what Venus is doing in your chart. And what about the sign of Taurus? Is it empty? Does it have planets? If so, which ones? If you have any planets in Taurus, that's a lot of values there for those planets. That house is an important house. It holds some values for you. Generally speaking, Taurus will show things that are value to us. Themes in your Taurus house will bring things that represent some sort of value to you. Do you have planets in there? Are they operating in a healthy way? So sit with this, meditate. Look at your sign, the sign in the second house to start with. Next, you want to complement it with the ruler of that sign. So if you have Aquarius, for example, again, you want to look at the ruler, Uranus. Where is Uranus in your chart? Uranus is going to add more information about your value system, the quality of how you were nurtured and received that affection, what your connection is with what you give meaning to your life. So how is your connection? Is it healthy? Is it impaired? Is it exaggerated? The ruler is going to add information, the ruler of the second house. So you want to look at the aspects it's making as well if you're an advanced astrologer, and if not, then we're going to get there very soon. The location of Venus in your chart. Venus is going to add a lot of information. Where is Venus? Is Venus in an expressive air sign? Or even more fire sign? Fire signs are very expressive. Is your Venus in an Aries, for example? Or is your Venus in a cautious water sign like Cancer? Or maybe a more passive and laid back, a Venus in Taurus. A Venus in Taurus is passive, laid back, extremely extravagant, sensual in nature. But what if that extravagant, sensuous Venus in Taurus is conjunct Saturn? So Venus in your chart is going to add information about your desire nature. And Taurus, the sign of Taurus in your chart is going to also show you how important this factor is for you. Are there any planets in there? How are they operating in Taurus? Which house is Taurus is in for you? Because that house is going to bring some of that element of the desire nature into it as well. So you have a lot to meditate on right there. Look at your chart, start with your chart, and then look at other people's charts. Meditate and reflect on what it is that they as a soul are here to experience through their desire nature. These are deep questions to ask. You're not just looking at a chart asking yourself, how can I make money? You're saying, what did I choose to come with as a soul so that I can experience desire? And so that through the desire, I can create, thus the fertility quality of this archetype. Create, and then experience self-sufficiency, self-reliance, self-sustenance. This is a part of the journey of the cycle of man, and that is the function of this archetype.